Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. We got some very interesting news on Monday involving two programs that we have certainly talked about quite a bit here on the Aaron Torres pod over the last couple months. Those two programs, Arkansas and Kentucky. I know I've said it a million times, but I still go back to the day that John Calipari, that Sunday at the Final Four, when the rumors start to leak, when Wes Moore breaks the story. Arkansas is hiring John Calipari as its next head coach. And I remember saying it at the time. I said, listen, Kentucky fans and Arkansas fans, you guys are probably going to get sick of me talking about those two programs in conjunction at the same time. But the bottom line is those two programs are going to, at least for the first few years of the Calipari era at Arkansas, be inextricably linked. Arkansas hired Kentucky's former head coach. Kentucky has to do a coaching search. Kentucky obviously is going to learn from what they believe the mistakes were from the Calipari era. Calipari is going to bring players from Kentucky to Arkansas. And Adu Thiero, a Big Z. As we record here, we're waiting on word if DJ Wagner will be a Razorback. Those guys might be in Fayetteville for another 2 or 3 years. So the bottom line is that these two programs are going to be tied for a while. So I bring it up because this has now become a great rivalry that wasn't really necessarily a rivalry before this. All you got to do is check the comment section during one of these live streams. It turns into hogs versus cats, back and forth, yelling at each other, whatever. Anytime I post about one on social media, the other fans comment and get in my comment section say, we don't care about Cal, or we love Cal, or, Kentucky fans say, there's hope in Pope. Arkansas fans say there's no hope in Pope. So you go on and on down the list. These two programs are inextricably tied, and I believe it's going to be a great rivalry going forward. So why are we talking about it today here on a Monday night Aaron Torres pod? And it's because on Monday, the SEC actually announced its SEC basketball schedule for the 2024-2025 season. We don't have official dates of games, but one thing that did come out on Monday was which teams are going to play each other and where they're going to play, and of course, who is going to play each other twice. Now, with the SEC going to 16 teams next year, adding Texas and Oklahoma, it means that you're only going to play 3 opponents twice, and we found out who both Kentucky and Arkansas are going to play. In a world where I think we all kind of agree we should probably have Kentucky, Arkansas playing twice at least next year, it ain't going to happen. Kentucky's 3 home-and-home matchups are with Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Bama. And Arkansas's are with Missouri, Texas, and LSU. Let me say this. The SEC League office does not get very much wrong. I think Greg Sankey is as smart and as sharp and as whatever as any administrator in college sports. That goes without saying. I think they understand the branding. I think they understand big games. I think they understand matchups. And I think they've done a great job with the football stuff, with the way that they've handled that football schedule, which is going to be a bear in 2024. But I bring it up because from a basketball perspective, I'm here to say this. Greg Sankey, shame on you. I love you, buddy, but you completely whiffed on this. What are you doing? How are we not getting Arkansas and Kentucky twice next year? Instead, they will just play once at Rupp Arena. Now, in terms of this, let me start by saying this, because I know what people are going to say. Well, Torres, there's 2 new teams. There's only so many teams that can play each other home and home, okay? So I get it. I do. But remember, I think we even talked about this on the show. But John Rothstein, I believe, was the first one to put this out, is that the SEC with expansion, there would still be 3 home and home games every year. 2 would be permanent, and 1 would be what they call a mirror opponent, which is basically the league can just pick whoever they want to be your 3rd home and home, okay? And so any year it can be anybody. And so clearly the SEC has decided that Tennessee and Vandy are going to be Kentucky's 2 permanent opponents, at least for now. And next year, it's going to be Alabama. And to a degree, I guess what I would say is I sort of get it. By the way, I believe Arkansas, it's going to be LSU and Missouri. And then Texas is going to be kind of, we'll see what happens, et cetera, et cetera. And I might not be right on that Texas one. I know I am on Kentucky. But with Kentucky, like, I get it. Tennessee Vandy, you play every year. You've played every year since this league basically began. And with Alabama next year, Alabama might be the best team in the SEC, probably will be the SEC favorite going into 2024, 2025. And so the way the SEC looks at it, in my opinion, is pretty straightforward. Kentucky's the biggest brand with the most fans, most eyeballs on TV, and Alabama's coming off a Final Four and is the SEC favorite going into 2024, 2025. So in some ways, I get it. I'll even take it a step further. There was a chance that this was all decided before Calipari even left for Arkansas. So I sort of get it. But just because I get it doesn't mean it was the right decision. And if this was decided before Calipari left for Arkansas, even if it wasn't, somebody in the league office, sometimes in life, you just got to step up. Somebody's just got to kind of raise their hand in the back and say, guys, I know Alabama's going to be good. I know Texas and Arkansas would be interesting, old Southwest Conference rivals, whatever. But yeah, we got Calipari versus Kentucky. How are we not getting that game twice? Somebody needed to step up in the league office and say it. Because at the end of the day, let me say this. College hoops, I actually think, does a pretty good job of putting together schedules and games. I think especially in that early November, December timeframe, there's always a good game on every single night. You have the Champions Classic, Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, and Michigan State. You have all the Thanksgiving tournaments, the Maui Invitational, the Battle for Atlantis, this new one in Vegas with the NIL money, which we talked about the other day. You have the now ACC SEC Challenge. You used to have the ACC Big Ten, now you have the ACC SEC. You have all sorts of intriguing games early. So for the most part, they do a pretty good job. But this was such a slam dunk no-brainer, and especially at this moment in time in college basketball, in college sports. Because when I look at it, I'm just going to say this. I don't know, if we're being perfectly honest, like how many great rivalries there really are left in college sports, because the players change and the coaches change and everybody's changing all the time. And I just don't know how many are really left, okay? Like when I look at, college sports right now, like even Duke and North Carolina, like I hate to say it, but even Duke, North Carolina, I feel like it's kind of lost a lot of its juice over the last couple of years after Coach K retired, after Roy Williams retired, okay? We're losing Arizona, UCLA. That's no longer a conference game. Gonzaga has no real rivals, St. Mary's sort of, whatever. You just go on. There's just not a lot of great rivalries. But this was one that was like, oh, we got to set our calendars for this. Calipari returns to Rupp Arena, and then Kentucky has to go into Arkansas with Calipari on the other sideline. That would be insane. And so to me, this was such a no-brainer. And I just I can't even think of the reason why the SEC wouldn't want to do this. It makes no sense as far as I'm concerned. You want the biggest games, the biggest brands, the biggest opponents. By the way, I don't know why the TV partners didn't step in. Because think about it. Either SEC, either CBS or ESPN isn't getting Cal versus Arkansas. And so to me, it brings up two very interesting questions now that we know that we're only getting one game. First of all, shame on the SEC because we should have had two. But I think the two conversations that are interesting to me are this. I had people ask me, hey, Torres, what do you think the reception is going to be like for Cal when he goes to Rupp Arena for the first time? How bad is the booing going to be? Now, Kentucky fans, I see a lot of you in the chat. I would love your perspective on this. I could be way wrong, and I could be way off base, but I think Cal's going to get a reasonably good reception. Because didn't Cal kind of do you all a favor? Didn't he do Kentucky fans a favor? Like, first off, gave you 15 great years. In the last 3 or 4, they were not up to the standard that he set. But at the end of the day, he brought you a national championship, brought you 4 Final Fours, brought you a bunch of SEC regular season titles, a bunch of SEC tournament titles. And I know that it got too about the NBA over the last, the totality of the era. But it is still pretty cool to turn on an NBA game and, oh, Jamal Murray was a former Wildcat. Karl Anthony Towns was a former Wildcat. PJ Washington balled out this week, and every team has a former Wildcat. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the runner-up for the MVP. So he brought you a lot of good. So I don't think that's going to be a factor. But didn't he also do you a big favor? Like, isn't also part of this the fact that John Calipari did Kentucky a solid because he left? He saved you $33 million. You didn't have to fire him. You could start over fresh. You could get the coach that you wanted. And most importantly, not only get the coach that you wanted, but you also can learn from the mistakes of the Cal era. So all the things that you did not like about Cal, change with Mark Pope. Get somebody who gets the program, somebody who gets the state, somebody who isn't going to make it all about the high school All-Americans and the NBA players. So I could be totally wrong. And again, I'd like to see some comments in the comment section. Tell me if I'm crazy. I don't think it's going to be like this angry, hostile crowd. I think for the most part, people are probably going to be grateful that this guy left what he did and allowed the program a reset without bankrupting it for $34 million, $33 million. Now all that money's going to NIL. Now all that money's going to making sure Mark Pope has the best staff that he possibly can. So I'm not sure the reception will be bad. But what I'm also curious about is something I just said. I'm curious about when the game is played and where, like from a network perspective, that it's on. Because you talk about a game that the networks are going to battle for. Now, I don't know if they do like the draft the way that they do for college football. So for people who don't know, college football, like the Big Ten, right? So the Big Ten splits its rights between Fox, CBS, and NBC. And at some point, it just happened, I believe. Fox, CBS, and ESPN, or Fox, CBS, and NBC all sat in a room and basically said, okay, this is our whole inventory of games. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Remember, Oregon, Washington in the Big Ten, Oregon at Ohio State. Michigan at Washington is a game next year. And they all sat in a room and they kind of draft the games that they want. So I'm curious, when the SEC basketball draft comes next year, who gets that game and when is it? Because if they were playing twice, my assumption would be that one of the games would probably be on like an ESPN Wednesday night game, like Carl Ravitch, Jimmy Dykes. And then the other one is probably the last game of the regular season to wrap SEC play. You think back to this year, Kentucky, Tennessee. Kentucky plays Tennessee early in the year. That was actually a Saturday night game. And then they finished the year playing in Knoxville on CBS. And if you're CBS and you want to build momentum for the NCAA tournament, tell me a bigger game that you can possibly have to close out the regular season than the only regular season meeting between Calipari and Kentucky at Rupp Arena on CBS in late February, early March to get you ready for March Madness. Now, of course, ESPN's going to have a say. I wonder if it becomes one of those Saturday night college game day games. But I am fascinated to see what that game is, what the number is. We've talked about, what the viewership totals may be. Absolutely fascinating. But let me also say this. I think the SEC dropped the ball on not making this a twice-a-year game, at least for the first couple years.